Hi, welcome to High Output, the podcast exploring how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high-performing teams. I'm your host, William Chang, and each episode, we sit down with visionary engineering leaders who are forging new paths in our rapidly evolving field. Join us as we gain a window into tomorrow's software organizations and discover what's next for our profession and the entire software industry. This episode is brought to you by Maestro AI. Engineering leaders, let's be real, building high-performing software teams has never been more challenging. You're trying to ship faster, keep your team healthy, and communicate value to stakeholders. That's where Maestro comes in. Maestro enables you to understand everything that's happening in order to improve velocity, spot blockers, and make better decisions faster. Maestro seamlessly integrates with your existing tools like Jira, GitHub, and Slack, so you don't need to change your workflow. Maestro cuts through the noise, revealing exactly who is delivering, who needs help, and where your team is spending time and energy. Visit getmaestro.ai for more info, because you don't know everything, but Maestro does. All right. Today, we are joined by Richard Ford, the VP of Engineering at CyberCube. Richard holds a doctorate in quantum physics from Oxford and has an incredible track record. He developed IBM's computer virus immune system, built the world's largest web hosting system at Verio, and founded the Harris Institute at the Florida Institute of Technology, where he also headed the computer science and cybersecurity departments. He served as CTO at both Siren and Forcepoint, and was the president and CEO of the Anti-Malware Testing Standards Organization. When he's not defending against cyber threats, he's an instrument-rated pilot and a 3-time National Flute Association Big Band Jazz champion. Welcome to the show, Richard.
William, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, let's tell everybody about yourself. How did you get into engineering leadership? It sounds like you had a lot of other things you could do.
Yes, it was never my plan. I've always been into technology. I've always been into cybersecurity. My background is actually a physicist, as I think you read, right? So, I've never actually used my degree in all the time I've been working. But what I did do was a lot of programming when I was an experimental quantum physicist. I had a sort of career jumping around the industry, doing research at IBM, typically in cybersecurity. And I decided after Verio exited, it was a very large exit. I think it was around 5 billion. I had the opportunity to go off and do sort of something I really wanted to do. And I like people. I always joke I'm the extrovert engineer, right? I stare at the other guy's shoes. So what I did was, I thought, well, what about teaching, right? I could go teach computer science in university because I wanted to give something back. I mean, engineering, and let me see the whole world. It's been my life, and it's been a fun life. So I thought, can I give this back to the next generation? And then after doing that for about 10 years, one of my former students called me up and he said, "Hey, Dr. Ford, we're spinning out this company. Would you come and sort of help us untangle it?" And I said, "Well, sure, Brian, but it's been 10 years. You got to call me Richard now. You've earned first name terms." And that became, from WebSense to Forcepoint, and that got me out of academia one more time and back into engineering leadership. And I've enjoyed it. It's just been a blast.
Yeah. Well, not just engineering and extroverted, cybersecurity and extroverted. That's like an extra level, rare find here.
Yeah, the cyber crew are an interesting bunch. They're actually it's a great community. It's pretty welcoming to sort of new people. There's a lot of free resources for getting yourself sort of established, and I've been very proud and lucky to be part of that community for basically my entire career.
Yeah. How did you pick cybersecurity of all things? There's, after quantum physics, there's a lot of things you could do, right? So why cybersecurity?
So I was doing my PhD and I had all my data on an old IBM desktop. And one day I booted it and it complained in Spanish on the boot screen about telephone tariffs in Spain, and then proceeded to wipe half the drive. And I thought, well, that's different. And so what I did was I wanted to look at what this thing was, right? So I disassembled the virus and I wrote a little article about it, and it got picked up by a local company, Virus Bulletin, who said, hey, we'll pay you to disassemble viruses. And for a starving student, it was like a fortune for pulling viruses apart. And that was that. It was just pure chance. And what I loved about it was that it's like a puzzle, right? And so I love puzzles. I love solving puzzles. I love sort of pulling things apart. And you can make a real impact in cybersecurity as a team of one. Certainly back in those days, you could. And you were, 2 steps away from, the John McAfee's or the Alan Solomons, the luminaries who started antivirus, and you could get to them really easily. You could just pick up the phone and call John, and because this thing was all just evolving, it just became a world that just drew me in, and it was a lot of fun.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, how did you transition from, essentially hacking away, disassembling these viruses to becoming engineering leader? Like, what was the first experience that propelled you into wanting to be a people manager?
Yeah. So I had taken, and I think it shows in my resume, sort of the IC technical track, right? So when I left, the university where I was teaching, I actually went into essentially a distinguished engineer, I think was my original title. I wasn't managing people. I was supposed to be running a skunk works. But what happened is almost on day one, we had a staffing change in senior engineering, and we got a call which was like, hey, can you guys step in and run engineering for a little bit? And I probably should have been more careful when I said yes, because it's been years now and I still haven't managed to escape and get back to research.
Well, I mean, but being a professor as well, I mean, that's a bit of the same thing, right? If you're managing a group of folks or a lab or something like that.
Oh my gosh. Being a professor, being a department head specifically was the best training in the world for running engineering teams. Because as a department head in a university, you have no carrot and you have no stick. My biggest carrot is, hey, I can give you a slightly bigger office next year. My biggest stick is I will give you a bad review, but it won't make any difference to your raise and it won't make any difference to your employment because you're tenured. And so what you learn to do is to manage by influence, to get people on the boat and make them want to come with you and to build consensus. And I think there's a lot of parallels in some ways with engineering, where it's all about the people and it's about having influence across groups that you don't control. And so it was a tremendous preparation actually for going back into sort of big engineering roles. And I'm very lucky that I had that time. It's a bit like the Karate Kid, right? I got my 10 years of wax on, wax off, and then suddenly it was all sort of easy from that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear your the way you talked about consensus and everything, because not all leaders think that way, right? Like I think there are the types of leaders that are very top down, like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is it. And then there are the consensus building types of people, which are, hey, everybody has to agree on something. Where do you fall in that? And do you think there is that dichotomy, or is there some other way to think about it?
Yeah, I think that kind of is another way to think about it. I think that your leadership style has to adapt to face the situation that you're confronted with, right? Sometimes you do have to say, fiat, this is it. This is the road we're taking. If you don't want to go, this is probably where you want to get off. But that's a last resort. Most situations you can build consensus. So what you want is this big grab bag of different techniques for getting people to come along, ranging all the way from, hey, let's try it your way, right? To really let them explore, give them a lot of freedom, all the way down to fiat. No, I'm calling the ball. This is getting done this week, and this is what we're doing. But you shouldn't just default to a style. You should look at the person or group that you're working with. You should figure out what is the most effective approach to get the result that we need to get as a team. And I think this sort of failure mode where we have a default style as a manager or as a leader is actually terrible. It's a snare. And what we want to be instead is to pull the right style that the situation demands. It's harder, it's easier said than done, but I think it's very effective. And then that's where your personality and style comes through, because yes, by nature, I'm much more of a consensus builder and a group builder, but that's not my only style. And I can pull in whatever style the situation requires.
That's super interesting. Yeah. I mean, how does that reconcile with certain organizations that have, like, for example, Amazon is very, they have a style, right? And it's their corporate guide to that style. How do you think leaders should work in those types of companies? Because I hear what you're saying. It sounds fantastic and it sounds like the right way to do it. But there are also places where, you might have a little less flexibility, or you're even judged on certain things. How would you handle that?
I think, we all have one life to live. And so we should be living it doing something that we love, right? You don't want to waste a single minute. So I don't think of my employer as sort of my overlord. They're my partner. We're doing this together, right? And so you want to find an employer and an environment that suits your skill set, that suits how you think about the world. So for example, some people love those sort of more rigid environments, suits them down to a T. That's great. You should go do that. Some people love, like CyberCube. It's a very flexible environment. I'm very lucky to have an awesome boss, right? Who lets me figure things out, but is still there to support me. And it's about gravitating to what works for you, because if you're not in the right environment, you'll never do the best work of your career. And what are we here to do? We're here to do the best work of our career, because, it's so fulfilling to be at the top of your game. And I think it's about, it's a stylistic choice, right? So working with somebody is like being a partner, right? In a broader way than just business, right? You're sort of yoking yourselves together to the same plow. Then you need to have an environment that brings out the best in you. And so I think to really answer your question, it comes down to you and what's the chemistry like. If chemistry's good, go for it. If the chemistry's not good, if you have to go for it, but look at where you want to be. Try and move to the place that brings out the very best in you, because that's how you'll do your best work. It's never in isolation. It's always together.
I love that take. It's, I also think it's the type of thing that sometimes people don't think about, right? They think about if you're trying to find a new job or something, you look at the salary, you look at, it's a good name brand recognition or something. And you're talking about a deeper level, like trying to understand the organization, the people you're going to be working with, and making sure that really you jive as people. That's a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard because I do think it's a tough employment market right now for job seekers. I think it's one of the, in some ways, the worst markets I've seen since, the .com crash. And I think there's an interesting shift in power dynamic that we're seeing in the Valley, where we're getting more and more people going, it's extreme working, 80 hours a week, or you will be, flogged until you cheer up, or whatever it is. So there are compromises, right? I've just been very lucky in my career to be able to pick and choose where I go, because those things are important to me. I recognize some people don't have that flexibility, and I don't want to be blind to that. But at the end of the day, as you get more senior in your career, right, you do get, there's such a thing as enough when it comes to comp, right? Could I make more money than I make today? Yeah, probably. Not that I'm not paid well, but I'm paid enough. I'm paid very fairly, right? Money isn't my primary motivator. It's fulfillment. And I think the advice I would have for people who are more junior and coming up in their career is make certain you're earning enough, but beyond enough, make certain you're ticking your boxes for your life. You'll never get that day back again. You'll keep those relationships. I'm still in touch with people I worked with 20 years ago.
Nice.
old friends who we get together for barbecue every chance we can while we're in the same town or at the same conference. There's such a thing as enough. So don't just look at the salary. Make certain it's enough, that it's setting you up for success and that you're being smart about it. And hey, at CyberCube, I definitely get enough. But if your only motivation is money, I don't know if you really enjoy the ride as much. You're living for the future, and I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you mentioned the job market being difficult now. Um, why do you think that is? I mean, we all know it is difficult. And we know there's AI and everything, right? Like, but it's not just AI, right? It's not, it can't just be AI, or is it? Like, what are the reasons why you think the job market's a little tricky right now? And do you have any advice for people in that boat?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a number of things come together, right? So you're right. It's not just AI. AI is a factor, but it's not the only factor. I think there's a lot more uncertainty in the market in general. I think that's a factor. I think the power dynamic between employee and employer has shifted quite a lot over the last few years. And I'm not really certain what's driving that, but I definitely see it. If you think back to, 5 or 6 years ago, right? When you put out an opening, you couldn't hire really great people for love or money. It was a great time to be a recruiter. Now, when I put out an opening, I get really some top quality candidates organically. And so that tells me there's a shift. When I was interviewing, I experienced this from the candidate side where I'd get to meet with very senior leaders in big brand companies and then just get completely ghosted after an interview where we set follow-up actions. One of the things that stood out about CyberCube, and it's one of our core values, is, we just say what we're going to do and we do it, just really straightforward. But that's a rarity in the job market. So I think if you're job seeking right now, you've got to have a really thick skin. You've got to recognize that a lot of it is nothing to do with you. You could be, Richard Feynman or Albert Einstein walking through the door and still not get hired. Right. And so you got to have a thick skin, and then you need to network like it's a contact sport. Right. And the advice I give actually is not just to job seekers, it's to everyone who's working in the industry today, is the time to network isn't after you've lost your job or when you're looking for a new job. It's when you are gainfully employed. How many other people can you help out? Right? How many other people can you reach out to and go, hey, I can help you out. Let me help you with that. And those are the things that come back, that you're paying it forwards and it does get paid back to you. I think it's so important that as a community, we sort of do help each other out in these tough sort of turbulent times. And I think you should do that altruistically, but I also think it's enlightened self-interest that, when you roll the dice and it comes up snake eyes, you're going to have people in your corner who went, hey man, you really helped me out when I was out of work. And made some introductions for me. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah. It just plays into what you said earlier. It's a community, right? It's a community, and building your own community, helping others really helps lift everybody up. And I absolutely agree with you, by the way. It's with everything, right? If you're asking for something out of a place of need, that's almost like you want to be in a position where you don't need the thing that moment to do it, right? So networking when you're out of a job is definitely less, not less useful. You should still do it, but it's more that when you have a job, you have a position, it's almost like you are freer to do that than having to, network in order to try to get a job.
It's funnily enough, the way ultimately I found this job was one of my former students got laid off from a position, and I met up with her previous boss to see what had happened and what connections I could make, what introductions I could make for her. And as we were chatting, you know, as I was trying to help her out, he said, "Hey, did you know CyberCube is looking for a VP of engineering?" He said, "I can introduce you to the person that's sort of leading that search if you want." I'm like, "Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I'd be happy to take that call." And it turned into this job, but that wasn't my goal. I'd gone out for coffee to try and help a friend out. And I think there is a lesson there, right? We should be trying to do good things for each other. And I think, you know, karma,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's like a real thing, but there sort of
There's
is a
something
thing,
there.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So now the world is changing. There's new models popping out here and there. There's new, new stuff happening almost every week, right? So has your philosophy on managing people changed in this AI world? Is it still um, is it the same as before, or are there changes that you're looking at?
I think if anything, William, I've leaned further in to like upskilling and helping my people as opposed to sort of step back, right? So I still manage them very much the same way. But I was thinking about my H2 priorities just this
Mm-hmm.
morning, and I realized that, you know, in the current environment with a lot of uncertainty, I'm investing more in my
Mm.
people, not less. Because I think where I feel uncertainty, they must feel uncertainty squared, right? And so my management style hasn't radically changed, but I am making certain that I am carving out more time for my directs and, you know, the next level down. And I try and run as open door a policy as I
Mm.
can. You know, that anybody in the organization can jam 30 minutes on my calendar and let's talk. As long as it comes with an agenda, I'm happy to take the call. Um, you know, but I think this isn't a time for reinvention. It's more a time for sort of doubling down on the things that you think are
Mm.
right, and then history will tell us which things were right.
Yeah. Well, when people book these one-on-ones with you, like what are their concerns now? You must have heard a lot of concerns from your, from your engineers. Like, are people worrying about things? Are they, what are they talking about?
Yeah. So, you know, here's the other piece of advice, and it's like being a doctor. It's always the last thing somebody says in the meeting. That's the thing they actually set it up for, right? So they'll talk to you about the weather. We'll talk about Copilot. We'll talk about, you know, bugs in production or an idea they have for improving our rabbit queues or whatever. And then, you know, clock's coming down to 2 minutes left, and they go, "Oh, but we talk about one more thing." And it's always that one thing that's the thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I actually always book my meetings slightly short. So if it's a 30-minute meeting, it's booked at
Mm-hmm.
25, because I know that it's usually the last thing somebody says that matters. I think there are concerns all over the place. One of the things I'm doing, for example, at CyberCube, so I'm focusing a little bit more on metrics. I believe that you manage through
Mm-hmm.
data, right? You don't do away with your gut, but your gut is best augmented by
Mm-hmm.
data to make better decisions. And so I think that's always unnerving for people to have a boss who's quite into
Mm-hmm.
data. Excuse me. I think so. Sometimes there are questions about that. It's how do I think about it? Some of the time it's just, "Hey, Richard, we know you're thinking about stuff. Where are you going?" So appropriately communicating is
Mm-hmm.
important. Yeah. And I think with AI, and AI does drive some of this, right? So people are always worried, especially programmers, that, you know, they're going to get replaced by ChatGPT or pick your favorite model. And I think the role of the programmer will change, but I do think there is some concern about that. I think people see some of the large layoffs that have happened in, you know, the sort of FANG companies and said, "Oh my God, that could be me." Um, Again, fortunately, not something that's going to happen at CyberQ, but there are waves of layoffs that we're seeing, and some of them are quite big. So there's a little bit of uncertainty and discomfort, and change is hard for people, right? So they can't read my mind, even though I tell them all the time that my goal with with AI is not to have less developers, it's to cover more
Mm-hmm.
ground, right? Or to let you focus on the things that only you can do, and automate away the parts of the job that are just dull. I think there are always concerns about that. I'm also a relatively new manager at CyberCube, so people are still trying to get to know me. And whenever I travel to our different offices, I try and make certain that, again, I try and set up as many one-on-ones as I can, just over a cup of coffee.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. What's the best medium for communicating? Obviously, one-on-one is fantastic, but there are probably a lot of people there, right? Um, are you the type of person who sends, newsletters, or, like, I don't know, you record yourself talking about like a team all hands? Like, what's the best mechanism you found to communicate these things, which can be hard to stick, right? Because if you're 2-3 levels down from someone, it's hard to view them as a person almost, right? And more you view them as just like, oh, he's someone high up. Like, how do you combat that?
I think it's really hard. And I think the thing that breaks it is when your actions don't match your words, right? So that's again, another really important thing for engineering leaders. Your actions have to match what you're saying. Even if what you have to do is hard, let's say you had to ref or something, your words should match that. When there's a discontinuity between what you say and what you do, I think it destroys trust. So that's a what not to do. From a medium perspective, if there's one thing I've learned, is that everyone's different. And so you have to take a variety of approaches to sort of get your message across. So there's physical, we're in the same room, one-on-ones or group meetings. There's presence, going out to their satellite office. We have an office, for example, in Estonia, absolutely beautiful country in Tallinn. And I try and make certain I'm there for a week, at least 4 times a year, and try and leave those weeks relatively unstructured when I can. Then yes, I send out an email every few weeks to the team, telling them what's up next, what's going on. And we have all hands, and we have smaller group meetings, and I push stuff out in Slack. And I haven't thought about recording myself, so I might add that. I think the trick is that everybody consumes things differently, and we shouldn't require the consumer to match our style. We should try and match the style of the consumer, because that's going to be most effective. And so the approach I would take is sort of multimodal, and different things land differently for different people. I had somebody say to me, on it, your emails are too long, right? And I had somebody else say, oh, I love the emails that you send. There's no one size fits all, and I think you just have to embrace that. That the one thing that I say all the time, and it frustrates my wife to no end, is accept reality and deal with it. That's a Ray Dalio expression. But the reality is, I have a group of people that are multimodal, different cultures, different media consumption styles, and I shouldn't ask them to conform to my style. I should figure out how to hit all their styles in some sort of rotation.
Interesting. Well, maybe you should record yourself in podcast form.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do more. I love my team, I really do. And so reaching out to them and connecting with them is actually very fulfilling for me. It ticks my personal boxes of what I like doing. Not certain I could pull off a podcast though, William. I don't know. You'll have to give me some tips when we get to the end of this.
You can do an internal company podcast, podcasting with Richard.
There you go.
No. That is incredible. That's incredible. So I really like your take on emphasizing the human element, right? Understanding how people consume information, how people have their own styles. And it's really uplifting and very, it's very positive to hear that, you're trying to make everybody the best that they can be. That's incredible. How do you think things are changing with everything that's happening now? Do you think you mentioned you want to cover more ground, right? Like you want to enrich people, but also push them to be able to do more, accomplish more. Um, how do you see that moving forward?
So I think, past is prologue, right? If you want to know about the future, go look at the past. And the only place and time that I can find that reminds me of what we're doing today is actually the Industrial Revolution. Right. So if you think about what was the Industrial Revolution really, it was physical automation, right? Suddenly machines were doing the jobs that people were doing, but they were physical jobs like weaving cloth suddenly became mechanized, right? And if you look at the outflow of the Industrial Revolution, it changed the fabric of society, and it brought us to many of the things that we see and struggle with today. For example, just very quickly, the Industrial Revolution introduced us to child labor. When you were in an agrarian society, you had to be strong to like drag a horse with a plow around or throw a bale of hay around. You didn't need to be strong to work these machines in the factory. And so suddenly we had to deal with the creation of slums, the inner cities, child labor, even the disparity of pay between men and women some people would trace back to the Industrial Revolution. So it had all these second order effects that were very complex. Now scroll forwards to today, right? What are we dealing with? We're dealing with some level of cognitive automation, right? And I think just like a huge change, and by the way, I don't just put this on AI. AI is the culmination of a whole lot of things that have come together, like omnipresence of connectivity, omnipresence of data, really cheap storage, high levels of compute. It's all these things coming together at the same time that are now nibbling away at sort of man's last advantage. It feels like. I don't view it that way. I think there's a lot of good that could come out of this, but I've been doing this long enough to recognize that it'll be a bumpy transition to get to the other side, right? Just like the Industrial Revolution had outcomes we didn't expect, this sort of cognitive revolution will have outcomes we don't expect. And so I'm very hopeful about the long-term future. I think the journey could be sort of massive.
Yeah. Well, to play devil's advocate a little bit, but a lot of the effects that you talked about for the Industrial Revolution were not positive, right? You talked about, child labor came out of that, all of these things. I mean, do you think in net, do you think we're going to be in a more positive world in the future? Or do you think that, I don't know, we're just saddling ourselves with more permanent problems?
I think we have, as a sort of species, I think we have some difficult problems to think through. But I also believe in people. Every time I start to feel like life is really hard, I run into somebody spectacular that just gives me hope. And I go, you're an amazing human being. This is what we build the future on. And I think these things are always pendulums, right? And they swing from one side to the other. We always overcorrect through the middle and come out the other side. So I think we have to be hopeful, right? And then we have to act, I think it's just super important to approach the world through those sort of glasses of, we will be hopeful at the end of the day. We will try and look for the positives. Otherwise, we should just roll over and hang it up. And that's not my style.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I truly, I think, you bring a very positive outlook to the world and for some people, in some dark times. So really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the chance to chat with you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of High Output. If today's conversation was useful, please take a moment to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Engineering leadership is evolving rapidly, and we're committed to bringing you insights from the front lines every week. Visit getmaestro.ai/high output for show notes, transcripts, and past episodes. Until next time, I'm William Cheng, and this has been High Output, where we explore how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high-performing teams.